Did you know that the milk-nourishing white children came from black babies who were allowed to starve to death just 3 cabins away? For 2 centuries, this was hidden, buried in plain sight. Plantation records from Louisiana to Virginia reveal a brutal truth. White families literally fed their babies by killing black ones. Not metaphorically, literally. Every Southern mansion, every historic home stands on graves too many people want to be forgotten. Thomas Jefferson's neighbors did it. George Washington's friends did it. Every founding father you were taught to revere knew and stayed silent. What would it mean to see America's history not as glory, but as a system built on the deaths of innocent black children? This is the story that shatters every lie about the civilized Old South. Between 1750 and 1865, white families across the American South ran a baby-killing operation so evil, so calculated, that historians have been burying it for over a century. But we have the documents, we have the letters, we have plantation ledgers with literal receipts for human milk. Within 3 days of giving birth, enslaved mothers had their babies ripped from their arms. Not because they were bad mothers, not because their babies were sick, but because white women decided breastfeeding was beneath them. They called it unladylike. They said it would ruin their figures. So black babies had to die for white vanity. One enslaved woman in Virginia gave birth on March 3, 1835. The plantation records, which still exist in the Virginia Historical Society, show that by March 6, her baby was taken to what they called the nursery. But this wasn't a nursery. It was a death sentence. These cabins where black babies were kept, no heat in winter, no cooling in summer. One elderly enslaved woman watching 20, 30 babies at once. Sugar water if they were lucky. Cow's milk that destroyed their stomachs if they were very lucky. Nothing but slow starvation if they weren't. The mother was dragged to the big house to nurse a white child. She could hear her own baby crying from the quarters. Her body would respond. Milk letting down for a child she couldn't feed. But that milk went into a white baby's mouth instead. Her baby died April 1st, 1835. The cause of death listed in plantation records? Failure to thrive. That's their euphemism for murder by starvation. The white child? He grew up benefiting from the very system that killed her baby. This happened thousands of times, every single year, in every single southern state. Louisiana sugar plantations turned this into an industry. They had formulas, actual mathematical calculations for how many wet nurses each plantation needed based on white births. Plantation records show enslaved women were forced to get pregnant on a schedule to ensure fresh milk was always available. The Carolinas wrote it into law. Legal codes specified that enslaved mothers could be requisitioned for nursing duties. That's right, they made baby theft legal. Virginia, where founding fathers talked about liberty, had more wet nurses than any other state. The very men who wrote, "All men are created equal," owned women whose babies starved so their wives wouldn't have to breastfeed. But who kept these records? Who managed this entire murder system? The answer will make you rethink everything about Southern gentility. Before we dive deeper, if you believe these hidden stories of stolen lives and silenced voices need to be heard, subscribe to Black Stories Untold. We're uncovering the truths they've spent centuries trying to erase. Now, let's get into the video. Everything you've been taught about slavery being run by cruel white men is only half the truth. Here's what they don't want you to know. White women were the CEOs of this baby-killing business. Stephanie Jones Rogers uncovered the truth in They Were Her Property. White women weren't passive bystanders. They were active architects. Legal documents show them independently owning enslaved people. Bills of sale carry their signatures. Letters between plantation wives compare wet nurses the same way someone today might compare appliances. These so-called delicate Southern belles, they were running a calculated system of milk theft. Martha Washington, the First Lady, used enslaved wet nurses. Her close friend Sally Fairfax wrote about struggling to find good milk women. Thomas Jefferson's daughter Martha managed the wet nurses at Monticello while her father wrote about liberty. These weren't random cruel wives. These were America's founding mothers. Their letters survive, and the cruelty is chilling. Women wrote things like, "The Negro woman's milk flows better, while black babies starve steps away." Mary Boykin Chestnut, whose diary is considered core Civil War history, described her wet nurse like she was reviewing a product. She gives good milk, but tends toward melancholy since her own child passed. Passed. Not starved because her mother's milk was stolen. Just passed. They justified it with cruel lies, that black mothers don't feel love, that they were naturally made to nurse white children, even claiming God designed their bodies to serve white families. Their ideology wasn't ignorance. It was deliberate self-comfort while babies died crying for food. And it gets darker. Some white women time pregnancies of enslaved mothers to match their own, like livestock schedules. Rosewood Plantation kept records of menstrual tracking to ensure fresh milk on demand. Others enforced punishments when enslaved women tried to feed their own babies. Blackwood Plantation used a wooden collar that physically prevented mothers from bending down to nurse, a torture device created solely to starve infants. Even public officials bragged about it. Rebecca Latimer Felton, the first woman U.S. Senator, openly praised her efficiency in managing wet nurses. She admitted it in her memoirs, published it, celebrated it, and history quietly looked away.
Let me hit you with numbers that should be taught in every classroom, but aren't.
Enslaved infant mortality rate, 50% before their first birthday. Some plantations, 70%. White infant mortality rate, 25%. The difference? Starvation from stolen milk. But it gets worse when you break down the numbers. Of black babies separated from their mothers for wet nursing, 80% mortality rate. 80%. That's not healthcare failure. That's systematic extermination. A wet nurse added $300 to an enslaved woman's sale price in 1850. That's $10,000 in today's money. But a woman who'd recently given birth? $500 extra. $17,000 today just for having functioning breasts. The newspapers, Richmond Examiner, Charleston Mercury, New Orleans Picayune, they all ran ads that literally said, "Fresh milk available," when selling human beings. Here's an actual ad from the New Orleans Picayune, December 1858. For sale, Nancy, age 22, recently delivered, excellent milk supply, child not included. Child not included. They were advertising that they'd already disposed of her baby, but the real evidence comes from the women themselves. Their story survived in the worst possible way, through the records of their owners. An enslaved mother on a Georgia plantation had 6 babies between 1845 and 1858. 5 of them died before their first birthday while she was forced to nurse the plantation owner's white children. Plantation records listed each death with a single word: expired, as if they were products that went bad. Meanwhile, the owner's wife had 4 healthy children during the same period, all cared for by this enslaved mother. A mother in Virginia lost twins while nursing the plantation family's daughter. The plantation ledger records the loss of property from the twins' death at $50 each. They calculated the monetary loss of dead black babies while she, the mother, was forced to nurse white children. In South Carolina, another enslaved mother tried to run away after both her babies died within a week of separation. They caught her and whipped her. The overseer's report states she received 30 lashes for abandonment of nursing duties. Then, they forced her to return to feeding the children of the people who had killed hers. Patience, God, that name, nursed for 3 different white families over 15 years. 7 children of her own. 4 died in infancy from starvation. The 3 who survived grew up never knowing their mother because she lived in the master's house. Plantation records list her as their most valuable property, specifically for her reliable milk production. 1865 came. Slavery allegedly ends. The 13th Amendment passes. You think this stopped? They just changed the name. Now they call it employment. Black mothers still had to leave their babies to nurse white ones, just for starvation wages instead of no wages. 25 cents a week in Mississippi, 30 cents in Alabama. not enough to feed their own children who were left behind. The want ads in Southern newspapers through the 1950s, yes, the 1950s, specifically requested colored wet nurses. They'd include requirements like must live in and no children, code for abandon your baby to feed ours. What almost nobody talks about, this system became the blueprint for centuries of medical abuse against Black people. The same doctors who wrote that Black women were designed for nursing went on to run the hospitals that refused to treat Black babies. The same medical schools that taught white supremacist theories about Black women's milk taught the doctors who still, today, don't believe Black women's pain. The Tuskegee experiments? Run by doctors trained in medical schools that taught Black bodies were different, less human. Ideas that started with wet nursing. The forced sterilizations of Black women through the 1970s? Justified by the same theories about Black women's bodies being meant for white use. Louisiana, Mississippi, Alabama, the states where wet nursing was biggest? These are the exact states where Black mothers die in childbirth at the highest rates in 2024. Black women die giving birth at 3 times the rate of white women right now. Not in 1865, right now. Black babies die at twice the rate. The same states, the same hospitals built on plantations, the same systems wear different uniforms. When a Black mother walks into a Louisiana hospital today and the doctor doesn't believe she's in pain, that's connected to when they said Black women didn't feel motherly love. When a Black mother dies from preeclampsia that any competent doctor should have caught, that's the echo of a system that sees Black women's bodies as disposable.
They thought we'd never find the proof. They thought the records would rot in plantation attics. They were wrong. Letters to a family member, preserved at the Virginia Historical Society. 63 letters over 20 years. The mother described her wet nurse with the casual cruelty of someone discussing furniture. The wet nurse seems melancholy since her infant expired, but she continues to provide adequate milk for the child. Her baby died, and the mother's only concern was milk production. Plantation Papers in South Carolina, 2,847 documents, include breeding schedules. Breeding schedules. They tracked 3 generations of the same enslaved family forced into wet nursing. Grandmothers who lost babies, mothers who lost babies, daughters who lost babies, all to the same white family. They kept receipts like this was something to celebrate. Account books from Louisiana's Whitney Plantation list milk women between horses and cotton gins. Human mothers itemized like equipment. One entry from 1853. Purchased Cora, milk woman, $850. The child died in transit, no reduction in price. The child died in transit, no reduction in price. Medical journals from the 1850s are even more damning. The Southern Medical and Surgical Journal published articles about the superior nutritive quality of enslaved women's milk, while admitting in the same paragraph that Negro infant mortality from maternal separation remains regrettably high. They knew exactly what they were doing. Dr. Samuel Cartwright, who invented the fake mental illness, drapetomania, to explain why enslaved people ran away, wrote papers arguing Black women produced more milk specifically for white consumption. He said it was God's design. This was published in respected medical journals, taught in medical schools, used to justify baby murder as divine will. This isn't ancient history. This is the root of right now. Every maternal death in the Black community traces back to this. Every baby who doesn't make it home from the hospital. Every mother who can't afford formula while working 3 jobs. These aren't disconnected tragedies. They're the continuation of a system that decided Black motherhood was a resource to exploit. The medical system that refuses to believe Black women's pain, built on theories that said Black women were meant for hard use. The wealth gap that keeps Black families in poverty, compounded by generations of babies who never lived to build anything. Calculate the stolen potential. Every Black baby who died meant a family tree that ended. Inventors who were never born. Leaders who never got to lead. Businesses were never built. Fortunes never accumulated. If those babies had lived, If those families had been allowed to grow, where would we be now? How many medical breakthroughs did we lose? How many artistic geniuses? How many entrepreneurs would have built empires? That's not a debt that can be calculated. That's a theft that echoes through eternity. As we reach the final stretch of this story, there's one truth we can't leave out. They stole our milk. They starved our babies. They documented it all like they were proud. Then they tried to bury the evidence. But the truth doesn't stay buried. Every plantation home tourists visit, taking selfies in front of those white columns, built on the graves of black babies. Every generational fortune in the South, grown from the milk of enslaved mothers while their own children died. Every founding father you were taught to worship, they knew. They all knew. This was never about survival. White women could nurse their own babies. Women did it for thousands of years. This was about power, about declaring whose children deserved to live and whose were disposable property, about building racial hierarchy one stolen feeding at a time. They wanted us to forget. We didn't. They wanted us to be silent. We're louder than ever. They wanted us gone. We're still here. And now you know the truth they've been hiding for 200 years. The truth about how America really built its wealth. The truth about whose babies had to die for white comfort. The truth that explains why black mothers still die at 3 times the rate of white mothers in the same hospitals built on the same plantations where this started. This is our history. This is America's real story. This is what they don't want you to know. If the system could starve children to build wealth once, what does it say about the truths we still haven't uncovered today? Comment your answer below, because talking about it keeps these stories alive and refuses to let them be buried again. If this systematic erasure shocked you, click on that video to uncover more hidden black history they've been burying for decades. This isn't the only truth they've hidden. There are hundreds more stories of stolen lives and covered-up crimes waiting to be told.